I'll never forget that night. It was supposed to be a simple get-together, an evening by the pool, enjoying the last warm night before fall set in. My stepmother, Karen, had invited a few of her friends over to our house for drinks and relaxation. My dad was away on a work trip, and Karen assured me it would just be some casual company. No big deal. I thought nothing of it at first, especially since Karen and I had always maintained a somewhat distant, cordial relationship. We weren't incredibly close, but she tried to include me, especially since she'd married my dad a few years back. And that night, she'd even asked me to join them all in the hot tub, so I figured it would be harmless to hang out with them. But then, Karen's friend William arrived. I'd seen him before, casually in passing. He was a business associate of my dad's and someone Karen had known for a long time. He was one of those guys who had a natural charm about him, the kind that makes you question whether his compliments are genuine or if he's just practiced in the art of being flattering. He smiled in that confident way that made everyone feel seen and appreciated. It was probably why Karen liked having him around. At first, everything was lighthearted. Karen and her friends were drinking and laughing, making the usual jokes. I was just sipping on soda, staying quiet in the corner of the hot tub, mostly listening. I felt out of place, like a spectator in their world of inside jokes and old memories. But then Karen, already a little tipsy, started nudging me to loosen up and get to know everyone better. She even offered me a glass of wine, which was unexpected. It felt strange, considering she had always been strict about drinking and boundaries, but maybe she just wanted to be the cool stepmom for once. I accepted it, more out of curiosity than anything. As the night wore on, I could feel the shift. The energy went from playful to, well, something else entirely. Karen, now visibly tipsy, was sitting closer to William than I'd ever seen. Their laughter grew louder, and soon she started playfully splashing him with water, telling him he should lighten up. William laughed it off, but I noticed the way he looked at her, like he was entertained but cautious, not wanting to cross any boundaries. Karen, however, seemed oblivious to that boundary. Or maybe she simply didn't care. At some point, Karen looked over at me and said, "Jessica, you've never met anyone like William, have you?" Her voice had a strange, teasing tone, one that made me feel awkward. I forced a smile and just shrugged, not sure how to respond. It was an uncomfortable moment, the kind that made me feel like I was being put on the spot for no reason. But Karen wasn't done. She started going on about how wonderful William was, how he had such a good heart and always knew how to make people feel special. William laughed it off, trying to deflect her compliments, but Karen was relentless. It was as if she wanted me to feel something specific, some odd admiration for him, and it was, well, confusing. Then, in a low voice, Karen added, "You know, Jess, you could use a guy like William in your life. Someone who understands the finer things." I laughed nervously, brushing it off, but I could feel William's eyes on me. There was something about the way he looked at me, almost like he was waiting to see how I would react. But he remained silent. He seemed to be assessing the situation, probably unsure how to react to Karen's increasingly bold remarks. And that's when I started to realize this night wasn't going to be just another poolside gathering. The wine, Karen's strange behavior, William's silence. It was all creating a sense of tension that felt both unsettling and bizarre. I wasn't sure if I should just get up and leave, but Karen kept pulling me back into the conversation, sharing little stories about her and William's past, memories that seemed intimate and made me feel like an outsider to her world. At some point, Karen excused herself to grab more drinks, leaving me alone with William. For a moment, there was silence, just the bubbling of the hot tub and the faint hum of distant crickets. I shifted uncomfortably, unsure what to say. William must have sensed my discomfort because he finally broke the silence, his voice calm and steady. "You don't have to stay out here if you're uncomfortable, Jessica," he said, offering me a soft smile. I shook my head, trying to laugh it off. "No, I'm fine. It's just, I guess I'm not used to this side of Karen." He chuckled, nodding. "She can be Well, she's a character, that's for sure. It was then that he looked me straight in the eyes, his gaze unwavering and oddly reassuring. You seem different from everyone here, Jessica. More grounded. I wasn't sure if it was the wine or the atmosphere, but his words felt strangely comforting. I could feel myself relaxing, even as I tried to keep my guard up. And for a moment, I forgot about Karen's behavior, the awkwardness of the situation, and just focused on the way William made me feel seen, in a way that was unexpected and, quite honestly, unsettling. Just as the moment lingered a little too long, Karen came back, laughing and balancing an unsteady tray of drinks. She plopped herself down between us, her laughter filling the air. Did I miss anything? No, nothing at all, I replied, trying to mask the tension that had been building. But as I said it, I saw William's expression shift slightly, like he knew exactly what had been left unspoken. And just like that, the night continued. But now with an unspoken tension between all three of us. As the evening wore on, Karen's behavior only became more unpredictable. She started leaning on William, laughing louder and calling him her best friend, in that exaggerated way people do when they've had too much to drink. It was odd, to say the least, watching my stepmother act this way, especially around someone who was supposed to be just a family friend. I sat in silence, swirling the remains of my drink, hoping she'd calm down or suggest we call it a night. But every time I thought she might be ready to wrap things up, she'd pull William in closer, as if to keep the night going as long as she could. I tried to laugh along and act natural, but I felt like an intruder in my own home, unsure what I was even witnessing. Then Karen, as if suddenly remembering I was there, turned to me with a mischievous grin. "Jessica?" she said, drawing out my name like she was about to share some big secret. "Why don't you tell William about that guy you used to like back in high school? What was his name again?" I felt my face flush, caught off guard by her random question. I don't really remember," I mumbled, trying to avoid eye contact with both of them. It felt strange and uncomfortable, like she was purposely trying to bring up embarrassing memories just to see how I'd react. "Oh, come on," she insisted, nudging me playfully. "I'm sure William would love to hear about it, wouldn't you, Will?" William laughed politely, but I could tell he was just as confused by her behavior as I was. "Only if Jessica wants to share," he replied, his voice gentle and understanding. I appreciated that he was trying to diffuse the situation, but Karen wasn't letting go so easily. "Oh, you're no fun," she pouted, playfully splashing him with water. But as she did, her hand lingered a little too long on his shoulder, her fingers tracing small circles on his skin. I looked away, feeling like I was witnessing something I wasn't supposed to see. It was subtle, but there was something in the way she touched him that didn't sit right with me. I cleared my throat, desperate to shift the conversation. "So, William, how do you and Karen know each other anyway?" He seemed relieved at the change in topic and leaned back, giving me a grateful smile. "We actually met through your dad. I think it was at a business event a few years back. We hit it off and stayed friends." Karen cut in before he could finish. "Oh, please, we're more than friends, aren't we, Will?" She winked at him, laughing as if she'd just made the world's funniest joke. William chuckled, though his smile didn't quite reach his eyes. "Karen likes to exaggerate sometimes," he said, giving her a lighthearted nudge. But I could sense the underlying tension. It was like they were both walking a fine line, each pretending the other's behavior was just harmless fun, when in reality, it felt anything but. I wanted to leave, to excuse myself and go inside, but a strange curiosity kept me rooted in place. Part of me needed to know what was really going on. The night continued like this, a game of subtle glances and barely disguised flirtation between Karen and William, with me as the unwilling witness. Every now and then, Karen would glance over at me, her eyes holding a strange intensity, almost like she was daring me to say something, to confront her. But I stayed quiet, too uncertain and uncomfortable to challenge her. Finally, as the evening started winding down, Karen announced she was going inside to grab some towels. She left without another word, leaving William and me alone in the hot tub. The silence was heavy, filled with everything that had been left unsaid. William looked over at me. His face softened with what seemed like regret. "Jessica, I'm really sorry about tonight. I didn't mean for things to get, well, out of hand like this." I shook my head, trying to play it off. "It's fine. Karen just had a little too much to drink, that's all." He hesitated, like he wanted to say something more, but he held back. I want you to know that I never wanted to make you feel uncomfortable. Your dad means a lot to me, and I would never want to do anything to jeopardize that." His words hit me in a way I hadn't expected. There was something so sincere about the way he spoke, like he genuinely cared about maintaining my dad's trust and protecting our family. It was a rare moment of vulnerability, and it made me see him in a new light. Before I could respond, Karen reappeared, holding a couple of towels and a fresh bottle of wine. She plopped back down beside William, her mood suddenly shifting to something more somber. "You know, Jess," she said, her voice soft and almost melancholy, "life doesn't always turn out the way you expect it to." I wasn't sure how to respond to that, so I just nodded, feeling the weight of her words. It was the first time I'd seen her this introspective, and it took me by surprise. For a moment, it was like the playful, carefree Karen was gone, replaced by someone who seemed almost sad. She looked over at William, her eyes filled with an emotion I couldn't quite place. "I think sometimes people come into your life to remind you of who you are," she said, her voice barely above a whisper, "even if you're not meant to be with them." William didn't respond, but the look they shared was filled with an understanding that made me feel like an outsider once again. I suddenly realized that there was a history between them, something deep and complicated that went beyond mere friendship. It was like they were connected by some invisible thread, bound together by shared memories and unspoken feelings. And in that moment, I felt a strange mixture of empathy and discomfort. Part of me wanted to understand, to know what had brought them to this point, but another part of me felt like I was intruding on something private and sacred. Karen let out a heavy sigh, breaking the silence. "Well, I guess that's enough reminiscing for one night." She forced a smile, but I could tell her heart wasn't in it. She stood up, wrapping herself in a towel, and gestured for me to follow her inside. As I got up to leave, I glanced back at William, who was still sitting quietly in the hot tub, lost in thought. He gave me a small nod, a silent acknowledgement of everything that had happened that night. And as I walked away, I couldn't shake the feeling that I'd just witnessed something deeply personal. A story of missed opportunities and lingering regrets, hidden beneath layers of polite smiles and casual laughter. That night, I lay awake in bed, replaying the evening's events over and over in my mind. I couldn't quite put my finger on it, but something had shifted between all of us, something that couldn't be undone. The bond between Karen and William was more complex than I'd realized, and I found myself wondering about the lives people lead just beneath the surface, hidden behind their facades. There were questions that lingered in my mind, questions I wasn't sure I'd ever get answers to. But one thing was certain. After that night, I would never look at my stepmother or her friends in quite the same way again.